right? So we're talking about programmatic and should TV become programmatic. So can I ask then, what do you think what is actually meant by TV going all in programmatic? So maybe, Graham, if I point that to you to begin with?
Thanks. Yeah, so I guess people subscribe to all sorts of different variations of what programmatic is. I guess for us, or kind of the way that I would kind of describe it is, there's something around being automated in the front end, around how you buy it. There's data that you can base your targeting off. And then finally, there's an element of being able to do it in real time. So that would be kind of, I guess, our true definition of programmatic.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And Catherine, from the agency point of view,
yeah,
does that shine?
Yeah, very much so. I think it's about accessibility as well, and making sure that we have flexibility built into that model, as well as all of, obviously, the really important fundamentals and foundational aspects that programmatic brings. You've mentioned data, you've mentioned transparency and so on and so forth.
Cool. And Tim, so from the ad tech point of view, these things, are they easily done? Is there more that could be done?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of progress in markets like Australia, where we're seeing a lot of the broadcasters, putting their own agendas aside and working together to come across a common way of working, and they're now all seeing the benefits of that. I mean, a lot of, we do a lot of work with the likes of Nine in Australia, and they've really started seeing an uptick in income, as have a lot of their competitors. So yeah, I think in terms of what more can be done, I think it's about trying to have a uniform approach. I think there are too many fragmented methodologies, terms of measurement, and I think we definitely need something that's uniform across all of those.
Cool. And I think we are talking, obviously, that is the TV market. You've described it right there at the moment. And so to get to this sort of nirvana, almost, of some sort of uniformity, are there things more that could be done to enable programmatic delivery for broadcasters, for example? From the ad server point of view, what do you think, Paul?
I think, well, first of all, it's great to be at a TV conference where programmatic is no longer on the periphery of discussions. Yesterday and today, it feels like it's been very much front and centre of all television discussion. So that's great progress from where we were several years ago. There's also a perception, right, the UK broadcasters aren't leaning into programmatic. And I'd like to kind of challenge that a little bit. ITV have built fantastic proprietary technology around programmatic. Channel 4 are leaning into programmatic, using existing infrastructure, but very much on their own terms. Sky, one of the early pioneers in automated buying and selling of TV inventory. So I think, let's just clear that up. Broadcasters are leaning into programmatic today, but of course there is more that can be done. And what more can be done? It's passing increased transparency into those programmatic ecosystems. Today, agencies and their advertisers have seen enormous successes when buying programmatic digital inventory and mobile inventory. And now the majority of television content is being delivered to households via the IP, so it's become digital. So it's a natural assumption that agencies now want to access TV campaigns in a programmatic way. But in order for more money to make its way to those broadcasters will have to pass more transparency if they want to compete with the likes of the big social giants that are increasingly being consumed on television, and the big US streaming services that we've seen today that are increasingly getting adoption by UK television audiences.
So Graham, as Paul mentioned, Sky, relative pioneers, we would say, in this space. I mean, with the likes of AdSmart and your addressable strategies, you could say that you've been programmatic in some aspect for a while. How have you seen this change over the years, and what do you think are the things that are holding us back from further change?
Yeah, so firstly, thanks for the kind words on the pioneering piece. Yes, it's certainly kind of, I guess, our journey, depending on your kind of definition of programmatic, started kind of over 10 years ago now with AdSmart. For us, it's always been about flexibility, right? So when we first kind of launched AdSmart, the thing that really attracted advertisers, which is ultimately kind of who we're trying to please, was this idea of being flexible about who you target. So really, it was opening up TV to a huge list of brands and advertisers who'd never really considered it before. I say brands and advertisers because it's obviously about smaller advertisers who haven't thought TV was that relevant to them, but it's also about big blue chip brands who suddenly go, actually, do you know what, there's a really good use case for this brand who I haven't had on TV to go on TV. So that flexibility has definitely kind of helped us grow, and that we've seen that through AdSmart, over the last 10 years, that's grown and grown. The bit around whether we go fully into programmatic, I think for us is, we will always, our kind of holy grail is make ourselves as flexible and easy to buy from as possible. So there's loads and loads of stuff in the TV ecosystem that's been done over the years around automating that front end buy. So, some people's definition of programmatic, we're kind of there because you can kind of buy through a platform and that sort of thing. When it comes to kind of real-time bidding, onto inventory that we could kind of ultimately, impression-based inventory. It's a tricky one. We're in a good place at the moment where we find the majority of the buyer side fill up most of our inventory through a kind of a programmatic guaranteed or an IO-based kind of buy. So until that changes massively, like if the agency world turn around and go, right, we're not going to trade with you unless you allow us to kind of programmatically bid on your inventory, we'll kind of continue in the way they're going, which is kind of iterative change over time, getting closer and closer to that point where you are able to do it in real time. But ultimately, that PG kind of version of programmatic, we can do quite effectively today.
And so I think that leads us on to you, Catherine. In terms of this then, because Graham's saying that we need the advertisers, we need the buy side to push, right? Is there a demand from advertisers for this sort of capability within linear, for example?
Yeah, I think the demand, right, comes from the key to the title. Is it time to go all in, and are we going to be effective and efficient, right? These are the two key elements here. Is it time? Super, super dependent, right? Clients have a whole host of different needs, but also a whole host of different setups. If you're a very mature client and you're a very ambitious client and you're really chasing down the benefits that programmatic can bring in measurement, in transparency, then yeah, of course it's time to go all in, and of course there's a clear efficiency that you can bring from making that kind of transition, and the pressure's certainly there. Now, for agencies, the question is about translating that ambition with our clients on their journey from maturity in a programmatic space, if that's suitable and relevant for them, of course, to making sure that value can be extracted. We're in and amongst a time of huge change in this industry, and it's huge opportunity, but with that comes high risk and high reward. So, yeah, I would say from an agency point of view, there's ambition. The ability to realise that demand is something that sits, I think, within an agency realm to facilitate, to kind of control and put a direction on so that it can become real. Because like we've just discussed, there's a lot of pieces coming into play and increasing interest. It's about connecting those dots and being in that position to do that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I would also say, sometimes when we talk about programmatic at television conferences, there's a perception that we're talking about the erosion of yield or open marketplace trading, when in reality that's not the case. TV inventory, premium TV inventory from broadcasters, is super scarce. Now, if you apply scarce inventory to the increased competition that programmatic can bring, it's about growing overall yields. It's the introduction of net new ad dollars to television. It's not about yield erosion, but again, sometimes I think the lines get blurred when we, again, reference ad tech and programmatic in the same sentence as premium broadcasters.
And so we saw some things earlier today with Freely launching, for example. There are barriers, I think, still in the industry about, some inventories just can't really be traded programmatically, can't really overlay data. Do you think things such as Freely and other initiatives, not just set-top boxes, which is sort of more traditional way of doing it, but the TV manufacturers getting more data, managing all of that, do you think there's opportunity there to sort of remove some of more of the consumer barriers, so to speak? Not all inventory can be traded programmatically. Is that something possible from a tech point of view? Do you think there's some solutions that could happen there?
I mean, if you look at digital media as a whole, it's not all traded programmatically, and there is still elements of data that can be leveraged. So, you know, in the interest of trying to remain as balanced as I can be, I would say there is obviously still space for traditionally bought linear TV, of course. But I think, you know, the focus is becoming audiences and the relevance of the audiences, and that's what we've seen in other markets outside of the UK, is that, you know, brands just can't get enough eyes on their brands, and so, you know, that's essentially what's been driving the change in some of the other markets. It's not as aggressively done in the UK, but yeah, I think it still comes back to the point that, you know, I was making earlier, that we still need some sort of uniformity around like the measurement side, which I know is really boring because we talk about measurement every time we talk about this kind of thing. But it is relevant because we're still seeing in some instances that, you know, I'm going to say digitally bought TV is still being measured on the old metrics of GRPs. We sort of need to drag that into a, you know, more of a consistent measurement type. You buy on YouTube at the moment, and no one really mentions measurement on YouTube. It still gets bought, even though some of it sometimes is questionable. So yeah, I think that's what we need.
Without skipping everything on measurement, I'm sort of reluctant for us to sort of spend the next 15 minutes talking about measurement, but if there are a couple of things that you want to add, that's fine.
No, I would just say CTV in Europe is it's basically one coin but with two different sides. You've got broadcasters that have established ways of trading, established measurement that works very well for them, but then you've got digital streaming services that haven't had those kind of historical mechanics in place, so they've lent into programmatic much quicker. And I think somebody was on the panel yesterday, actually, Jamie West, talking about whether or not, you know, if there was a time machine in TV, would you go back and rip up the trader mechanisms, the measurement practices, so you could lean into programmatic and digital much quicker to compete with the big US streaming giants. So I think that's something we have to be acutely aware of as well. It's not, should a broadcaster just lean fully into programmatic like a digital-first AVOD or FAST service, because they're dealing within different constraints, different historical mechanics that they have to adhere to. They're regulated in very different ways, so it's not just a yes or no discussion.
And do you,
Yeah, and sorry, I was going to say, Martin, like just to further clarify my point, if we look at some of the other markets where, you know, CTV or programmatically bought TV is accelerating, markets like the US, like Australia, and I keep mentioning Australia, I promise I'm not remotely Australian, but you know, what's happening there is it's just focused on audiences, right? So that's what the focus is, and I think that should be the focus for us here as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on an important kind of phrasing point there. Some can't be bought programmatically, and obviously, you know, if you've got, you know, someone who really does have, you know, a satellite still, and, you know, that's a very different kind of setup, because if we're looking at the now, we obviously have exceptions to what is fast becoming the rule. What's going to happen in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Well, we all know that trend, right? And the point, I guess, that we're raising Australia here is it can be done. So we're looking at examples of what good can look like, even despite all of these, you know, legacy, these historical structures that have served a fantastic purpose. But the world is changing, and if you're not ready for, you know, for next, you know, where have you been?
The only thing I'd add, and again, not to make this into a measurement panel, I think there's maybe just been what was about to be one, they'll cover it far better than we can, but from a maybe speaking for the broadcasters, but certainly from Sky's point of view, it's hugely important, the measurement piece, and so as kind of we evolve, we've tried to make that a really kind of key priority, you know, things like C-Flight, being able to kind of give advertisers that reassurance that, you know, everything that goes out on the screen is kind of measured in a really kind of standardized way that works for advertisers. So it's a really important factor.
And I think Paul mentioned some of the discussions yesterday in the leadership forum. One of them was about programmatic being a leveller in a playing field against the global giants. And I think, you know, we always used to, when we were counselling our advertisers when I was in the agency world, we used to try and describe it as TV broadcasters have thousands of advertisers, but the global giants have millions of advertisers, and obviously Sky and AdSmart was one way to do that. Do you still see that leveler is needed to sort of really grab some of those smaller budgets? I guess for you, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly kind of, as I said before, that's certainly where we've seen a lot of the growth is kind of making kind of TV more accessible to more types of advertiser. So I think that kind of continues to be, a focus for us, and that, allows us to kind of probably compete toe to toe more with a kind of a global streamer than not having it. So I think it's an important piece to be on top of.
Brilliant. And Catherine, do you think these small medium businesses, are they embracing TV? Do they want to get on TV? Do they want, we talk about CTV and how it opens everything up. Is that something that you're seeing at Dentsu?
I mean, everybody has a need, right, for, over the line. It's less, I think, about TV budgets, and it's more about how can we deliver this message in a way that is suitable for video, right? And whether that's cut long or shorter, for social, for TV, I think the question is the wrong way around. I think it's not about TV budgets, it's about how do we get our video and our message to people, and what is the best mechanism for that? It's not about TV anymore, because, if you're on a phone and you're watching Netflix, that's TV. If you're on a tablet in your room or with your family, that's TV. It's an experience, right? The question is more about the mechanics of how we reach people with a message, and then really importantly, as we've been, skirting around, how we measure that and understand it and the value that can bring.
Yeah, and I think broadcasters are in a really strong position at the moment. As more of their content is delivered digitally, that enables them to grow their share of advertising from the big social platforms. Broadcasters invest a huge amount of money in high quality TV content, and advertisers historically, smaller advertisers, haven't had the ability to get their ads onto the biggest screen in the household, so they've had to lean into user-generated content. But again, the more that broadcasters make their inventory discoverable and accessible in a programmatic way, they can start going after net new, smaller advertisers that maybe historically they've never had sight of before. Again, so it's growing the overall pie of TV advertising in the UK and Europe, not just transitioning linear into addressable environments.
Well, I think the consumer is doing that already, aren't they?
Course.
So,
it's an important point around consumer as well. I mean, one of the things we think about a lot is again, as much as it's standards around measurement, it's standards around creative copy as well. So a big thing for us, and I think I speak again for all broadcasters, is that you've got a system that allows you to kind of be reassured that the advertising that goes in front of the consumer is, it's a decent ad, it's got the right kind of standards in place to kind of marry up with the experience you want consumers to have when they're viewing your platform. And obviously that's one of the challenges for a broader kind of global business is kind of keeping that kind of standard spotlight on the kind of creative and making sure ads are kind of cleared in a kind of standardized way is kind of, well, it's certainly important to us for now.
And so just touching on the sort of social side of it, obviously we've acknowledged increasingly consumers are spending more time there. Do you spend? Is that a focus area for yourselves?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, certainly from a trying to attract kind of newer and younger audiences, we're seeing a huge growth in consumption across the kind of social platforms. For us, kind of at Sky, it's really about taking our broadcast kind of premium content, shortening it down into a bite-sized kind of chunk, and more often than not, that's kind of to do with sport. So sports highlights, for example, consumption on that is kind of 4x kind of year after year, because there's just so much audience out there consuming on these different platforms. So when you get the right content into the right platform, the audience is there. And we can see the data that shows, if you get that content in front of the audience, they will kind of gradually get to the kind of TV screen over time. So
excellent. And Catherine, so it was Catherine and Graham quite a lot. Do you see other broadcasters? Are they sort of embracing social, YouTube in the same way that Sky are? Is it becoming? I mean, we all know that people at different places, but do you think they need to do more? Do they need to accelerate because the audience is shifting that way?
Look, you can't do too much, I don't think, in this space. We've just discussed the pace of change. If it's being set by our audiences and we're not keeping up, are we doing our jobs properly, and are we being as ambitious as we could be in this space? You know, we talk about supply and demand quite a lot, and there's obviously a fine tipping point between, you know, the two having a relationship, but it's really clear that the way that we need to look at it is holistic. And I think the key to that, you know, transaction is a programmatic one, because when you have, you know, a much more open and accessible space for that inventory, it allows you to be more customer-centric in that you're reaching them in that way that they're experiencing it, and that's the whole beauty of it, and that's the whole point.
So I want to sort of pivot a little bit, and we talk about fast a lot at these conferences, and fast TV and fast channels. Surely that's the way to, that's a strategy, that's a tactic actually to help really accelerate addressability and programmatic TV. Tim, obviously you work across multiple markets. Do you see that this take up in other places as well? Is fast a catalyst for this, or do you see it's likely to be?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've already spoken about a couple of markets where that's accelerating quite quickly. I think in the markets we mentioned earlier, US and Australia, I think those particular markets, CTV is, you know, I think either the third or fourth largest media type, if you want to call it that, on its own. So there is definitely an acceleration of the demand for that, and as I was saying earlier, it's all about trying to get as many eyeballs as possible on the brand. So yeah, we are seeing quite a big shift elsewhere. Even in other markets in Europe now, we're even seeing, you know, apologies if anyone's French, but the French market, traditionally quite a stubborn market in this, you know, even they're leaning in quite a lot to the likes of CTV, and same with Italy, so yeah.
And how long do you think it will be? Because essentially, to the consumer, a fast TV channel is the same as, you know, it looks and feels the same as a linear TV channel. From that tech point of view, with the transition, maybe, Paul, do you have any view as to when that could be fully enabled or mostly enabled?
Well, I think there are certain TV OEMs that already have very large proprietary fast offerings. Samsung would be a prime example. Samsung TV Plus, a fantastic experience with a multitude of different premium channels, and a lot of that is already being enabled in a programmatic way, where their advertisers can access either directly or through programmatic platforms, dependent on the necessity of the agency that wants to target a streaming audience on a Samsung device. So I think, fast to your point, absolutely it replicates the traditional linear experience. There's an EPG, which is like the digital version of the TV Times, if anyone is old enough to remember that. But you get home from work or college or school and you can just flick through the guide and land on a show. And I think more and more audiences will lean into that as they get kind of search paralysis. There's a lot of content, right? There's never been a better time to be a TV viewer, but sometimes you just don't have the time or patience to search for something to watch on demand. And fast has proven to be a great way to capture audiences' attention, and more viewers are now leaning into fast than ever before, certainly from a European point of view.
And so like, obviously most of the linear viewing is still done, or linear plus fast, most of it is in the linear stream. Do we see, like, in fast forward 3-4 years, is there a potential for ITV1 to be 99% fast, do you think?
Well, I think you touch upon a good discussion. We haven't really discussed discoverability today, but I think over the next several years, that's going to be the real big battleground in CTV. It's, are you listed within an OEM's EPG? Are you an app that has to be discovered? If you are an app, are you on the front page, or are you 10 pages deep? So I don't know the answer to your question, but it's an important question, and I think we're going to have a lot more panels over the next several years around content discoverability and why that's so important for streaming services.
Yeah, so it's a big focus for us as a business as well. Obviously, that kind of idea of being a subscription service is all about curation. It's all about kind of, you know, really premium content that our customers are prepared to pay kind of a monthly fee for. So that curation piece becomes, you know, much a bigger focus for a wider set of players in the space. There is, I reckon, with fast, there's probably maybe more a personal view than a Sky one, that there is there will come a point where there's so much inventory out there, potential inventory out there, and we're probably seeing the start of that already, where actually the reasons why programmatic was so strong and so quick to get hold in the digital space was because there was so much inventory out there, so much kind of what people called remnant, but ultimately kind of free inventory that wasn't being used. There's a potential that you get into kind of a space where there's just so much out there that the only way to really kind of strategically think about how to sell to advertisers is through programmatic.
So
interesting to watch.
We've only got a couple of questions. I've got one and then we'll wrap up. Yesterday in the sessions, so sorry if you weren't there, but where there was a regional broadcaster talking about seeing a lot of inventory being traded programmatically where programmatic hasn't added any value onto it. Do we see that still in the UK as those sort of bad behaviour has been sort of ironed out a bit? Because the example that they used was, why are they paying tech fees? Why are they paying data fees? I'm going to put that out to the panel if anyone wants to.
I think it's important, very quickly, if you are a streaming service or a TV manufacturer, that you work with buy or sell side ad tech that's been built from the ground up around streaming. Lots of programmatic technology was built for banners. It wasn't necessarily built for ad breaks and intelligent ad pod construction. So that's a really important call out. Work with streaming first ad tech partners. Otherwise, you are going to run into these issues where you've got clunky pipes and the transparency that those on the buy side need may not always be passed because the pipes can't support the latest OpenRTB protocols, such as 2.6. That's a bit geeky, but fundamentally it means that you can transact streaming in a programmatic way and in a transparent way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of almost like a naive question, right? There's a cost of doing business and there's a cost of innovation, and investing in it to get it right is important. If you put that money in the right place and you've used the right kind of long-term mindset and you know where you're going, then it's not like there haven't been hidden costs before, and transparency is a really big question here, but it's a big part of the value economy. It's about saying, yes, transparency is important, and here's how we're going to do it. And by the way, you can see the whole thing, and that is, in essence, right, the value that we're talking about, going all in on programmatic.
And I would just add very quickly to that 2 points. One would be that's why broadcast for first-party data will be so valuable. That you relinquish that cost, so to speak. And then I would also say that it's actually no. Let's just stick with my first point.
That's fine. Excellent. Well, we've actually almost on time. Graham, have you got anything else to say at the end?
I don't know, yeah. I mean, on that topic, I guess we've probably had a few, like any kind of innovation in this amazing industry, you have a few false starts. So we've had situations where, we've integrated with as many kind of the players that you, agency or demand side, want to integrate via, go for it. And like, well, hang on a minute, I'm kind of buying the same stuff and I've got to pay a little bit of a tax fee here and then I've got to pay a tax fee. But to Catherine's point, if you've got really, and to Tim's, if you've got really good first-party data and you can prove the effectiveness of it, that there's kind of a really kind of solid case for doing it.
Brilliant. Well, we've covered quite a lot there. There's a lot to sum up, but essentially, if we're to do it, we do need certain standards in place and certain connections in terms of data and measurement, which we didn't touch on. So hopefully we give you a measurement-free one, because you've got Barb coming up now. So
are we going all in on programmatic? Is it a thumbs up? Yeah.
Are we going all in programmatic?
Yes.
Yeah? Show hands.
Excellent.
Excellent.
It's everyone. Cool.
Thank you for your time today. And